Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. Elections have consequences, so they tell us. And with the recent victories of radical communist and Islamist elements, certainly in New York, but then also aspiring psychotic child killers, as the Attorney General, Jay Jones, has now been ensconced in Virginia. Friends, I think that we really need to take the blinders off, and we really need to be honest about what it is that is in front of us and prepare accordingly, because history tells us what their next steps are. Let's get started. So, only a few months ago, the world witnessed the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the peaceful, willing to dialogue, willing to talk conservative, the conciliatory one. And in his death, I've unfortunately seen, as many of you have, the most toxic behaviors of people come out, which I expect at this point with a culture and a nation as unraveled and as decompensated in its moral base as what ours has become. But if you thought that there was going to be any check on the conscience, absent though it may be, of the left, and any type of self-calibration to get them to dial down their rhetoric, oh friend, what a mistake. Because now in New York, merely a couple of decades after the Islamist attacks on New York of September 11th, 2001, New York has elected an Islamist communist mayor. Oh, the irony. Makes you really wonder why it is that we got involved in all of these wars, supposedly to counter the threat when we imported it here at home, and now it's sitting at the head of the executive branch for the largest city in the United States. Good to know. Or perhaps you thought, as many people had hoped, that when the left saw the consequences of their rabid rhetoric, that they would dial back, and perhaps that the political infrastructure would not be advocating so loudly for such violent things. But no, the victory of Jay Jones as the Attorney General for the Commonwealth of Virginia really put that one to rest. The man is an aspiring psychotic child killer. And in his texts, of course, he fantasized about watching the children, little children of his opponents, die in their mother's arms. Does this sound like someone who is going to be fair and equitable and discharging justice under the law to everyone in the Commonwealth of Virginia? Oh, no. No. And of course, we have now, as the elected governor of Virginia, a cackling CIA spook and a wino mom who really is probably one of the more dangerous ones. Because on one hand, with the way that she looks, it's somewhat disarming, but her policies are certainly violent. And now with the two of them together, with their powers combined, it's not a good look for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I can guarantee you that Jefferson, would they have been in his day, would have already been in arms. So, what is our nation to do, and what are we to make of this? Well, friends, unfortunately, by the time that most people who are good, God-fearing, and conservative, and uninitiated in violence feel justified in taking up arms to defend themselves, it's usually too late from a political standpoint. People who are good usually do not wrap their head around just how evil the people who are bad really, really are. And you've got one now at the head of the Commonwealth of Virginia's leadership in the executive branch. And you certainly have one with Jay Jones. And of course, you have one with Zohran Mamdani. Granted, you could say that much of this was caused by gerrymandering, certainly in Virginia. You could also make the case that it wasn't actually New Yorkers who voted because, oh wait, it wasn't actually New Yorkers who voted in New York because the majority of people in New York are not native New Yorkers. They are the imports from the trough of the rest of the world. People who hate the United States just as equally as Zohran Mamdani and the parents who birthed him and then brought him here, of course, to serially dismantle the United States with the best efforts that he possibly could. So we're going to see in the coming days what it means. I don't think that in the next election, that is the presidential election moving forward, I don't think that there's any incentive right now for the left to moderate their politics or their tactics. If you thought that there was going to be any sort of dialing down of the rhetoric with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, wrong. Because look at what they just elected. You literally have a psychotic, aspiring child killer who is now the Attorney General of Virginia. Good to know. Good to know. The Trump administration has a few things that it could do. There are certain laws that are on the books, particularly from the 50s, in regards to the communism that was being combated domestically in the United States under the McCarthy era. McCarthy, in my opinion, didn't go far enough in certain areas. And I think that we can see that borne out in the reality of the fruit that we're eating today, where you literally have a communist, an open communist Islamist, who is the mayor now of the largest city in the United States. But there are things that can be done. The issue is the Constitution is going to be pressed and tried and potentially shredded in many different ways. But we are guaranteed a republic as a form of government. And anyone who comes against that is a domestic enemy of the United States. Now, the question is, why didn't more of the Republican base or the conservative base show up in these elections? Because when you look at who the overall amounts, like from aggregate amounts of what the registered Republican voters were, for instance, in Virginia, and who actually showed up, it wasn't a great showing. Question is, why? Why is this? Well, friends, I may have an unpopular opinion here, and I hope that you'll absorb it with a little bit of grace and process it as well. But I think that there is the own internal civil war happening right now on the right, and this is what the left is capitalizing on. Because with the current administration, one of their tactics has been to basically speak the reality into existence, but it is manifested and being received as gaslighting by a large percentage of the population. When the Trump administration is telling people, and the heads of particularly the financial areas of the government are telling people that times are good, the economy is great, things are going well, that is factually incorrect. It is not correct. By no metric is it correct. The labor market is not doing well. Housing is unaffordable. The only groups of people right now who are not feeling the recession/depression, I will hold by that depression that we are in, are people who either retired with a large portfolio or people who retired with a large portfolio and also retired with large real estate holdings. If you had assets in real estate before 2020 and you also had investments in the stock market and you don't have ongoing significant expenses, you are not feeling this for the most part. Perhaps some people might say they are experiencing it in rise in property taxes and homeowners insurance premiums, etc. Let me know. Like, where are you feeling this? The majority of people that I know, including myself, that are actually feeling this are people who actually have groceries, bills, etc., and people who are trying to raise families, right? Young people who had hoped to save up enough to buy a home have been priced out. People under 40, young people in the United States, they're not engaged right now because really they're seeing that the administration and that the world at large is lying to them about how great it is to be in the United States. Yep, you can defend yourself. Yep, you sort of have freedoms in some ways. Just try and exercise them, and then you'll see how far your freedom goes. So a lot of people are very disenchanted on the right. They see, for instance, that the talking heads on the right and the political pundits are not really representing them. And furthermore, that there hasn't really been the change that they had hoped for en masse. Okay, so you have a certain amount of illegals that have been deported and arrested, but when you look at who actually elected Zohran Mamdani, probably a lot of people went up to the ballots and cast them who were not qualified to do so. And there are consequences for those types of elections. Now, furthermore, what does this portend for the future? The reality is, friends, and I've spoken about this at length for over a decade now. I may be early, but I am not wrong. As many of you know who are also students of history, we know where the track record of this type of momentum leads to. If you are caught in an abusive relationship, as a metaphor, if you are caught in an abusive relationship where you're swapping blows with people and they have voiced their intention to kill you, if you stay in that relationship, then either one of you or both of you is going to die. That's it. So the toxicity that spins forth from such interactions only leads to destruction and chaos and the subjugation of one party over the other, one will over the other. It is impossible for us to avoid violent armed conflict in the United States if we stay together. There is nothing, for instance, that the farmlands, the flyover states have in common in the rural areas, the farming areas of Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, with places like New York. And nonetheless, the policies of New York are going to directly affect them. And the outflow and the egress of people from New York that's going to come, when these taxes and these policies are implemented, this is going to overflow. And many of the people who, for instance, voted for this will be egressing along with it. It may take them a while, but they are going to directly impact the voting electorate of the rest of the United States. They are already impacting Florida, Tennessee, other places. Tennessee right now, guys, is unaffordable. People may think that it's a great place to move to. It is crowded, it is unaffordable, and it is rapidly changing. We are losing and seeing our culture absolutely destroyed by people who are moving in here with a desire expressly to change it and to make it like the places that they fled. So unfortunately, this is the reality that the rest of the nation has to deal with insofar as we have continuing dialogue with these more toxic elements of the nation. And so unless we have a national divorce wherein we put up boundaries and barriers between these other places who are hell-bent on destroying the foundation of our nation, we will be sucked into a conflict with them. If you don't want armed conflict in the United States and you don't want to see the nation effectively devolve into serial assassinations like what we saw with Charlie Kirk and gang warfare en masse, then we have to have a quasi-polite divorce. If you don't want a violent domestic, you have to have a divorce. And that is what we need in this nation. Now, preparing for this, unfortunately, I know that really ruffles people because they don't want to think in their mind that this great United States, the flag that they salute, they don't want to think that it could ever be any other type of configuration than what they grew up with and what they pledged allegiance to when they were 6 years old. But the reality is the world has changed. The electorate has changed. The population of this nation has changed. And what that population wants has shifted drastically and radically from the good old days of the 50s and 60s. Now, there are things, of course, that the Trump administration can do from a federal level to really clean out the communist elements that have taken foot in this country. But that's only one part of it, friends. When you look at why it is that the voters, all these registered Republicans who did not show up to vote in places like Virginia, why is it that they didn't show up to vote? There are many reasons, but the right can't figure out what in the world it wants to do right now. It can't figure out if it's going to look more like Charlie Kirk or more like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Nick Fuentes. Because really, when you get to platform Nazis and call that dialogue and discourse, you're going to alienate a lot of your base who has a conscience and who has a historical literacy about it. I would argue that in many ways, we are experiencing much of what was happening in the Reichstag and the German representative legislative body that led up to the Nazification of Germany. And this is not alarmist rhetoric. The reality is that Hitler's party, the Nazi party, did not have a majority in the early days. Oh, no. They had less than, I want to say it was 6% approximately of any type of representation. And it was the old school, watered down conservatives at the time who thought, you know what, like they're going to fail so miserably, give them the reins and let's watch them fall on their faces. Oh, and what happened when they gave them the reins? Bad things. So the right and the people who have a conscience and a moral compass and a biblical foundation on the right, when they see the ascendancy of the same type of Nazi rhetoric, they're taking pause right now and they're like, you know what? I don't jive with that. I can't show up for that. I can't show up for a party who refuses to police its own. And that's the issue. Because people on the left are quite willing to abrogate any type of individual liberty for the greater groupthink. That is why they are so effective at organizing, whereas people on the right are willing to live and let live. Okay, so you have some really toxic ideas, but you're not actively hurting me right now. Okay, you do your thing. So it's because of our love for individual liberty, freedom, and the right of freedom of expression, the First Amendment, etc., that ultimately is hamstringing us in being able to be effective, not only from a political standpoint, but also from being honest about the threat that is in front of us. We will be, barring a divorce from these people, we will be ultimately in violent clashes with them very soon. Because when you have peaceful people willing to dialogue like Charlie Kirk, who were murdered by a dude who liked to screw around with his furry boyfriend and engage in late night video gaming sessions with friends under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Like when that type of element is being supported and fed on the left, with the right effectively saying, oh, live and let them do their thing. They're not actively hurting me. Like once it starts getting into gang warfare, there's not going to be a good out for this, friends. And even if we do end up in the civil war that people have long prognosticated would come, it's what comes after it that's the scary part. It's what comes after it. So my hope would be that self-selecting out of that reality with a national divorce and a breakup, whether it's with an Article 5 Convention of States radically castrating federal power, or with straight up breaking away of these toxic elements of the country and the rest of the country saying, stay out, we don't want you, get away from us. It's going to have to happen. Neither one of these solutions is peaceful, but you are not going to see, and I think it's time that we put that dream to rest. We are not going to see some type of en masse revivification of the 1950s and 60s, the early 60s, I would say, the good old days of prosperity in America that was born from the victory of the Allies over the axis of good versus evil, of right over wrong. We have no compass for right or wrong anymore. We can't even figure out which bathroom to use. Why in the world would we expect that we would have the blessing of providence to move forward in peace, as opposed to the opposition of war that results from a nation who has destroyed itself by eating away its moral foundation? So how do we move forward through this? Well, friends, we've talked about this on the channel before. Beans, bullets, and Band-Aids is part of this. I do not wish for this to happen. This is not something that I am gleefully crowing about. Unfortunately, like many of you as students of history, we know what happens when things come to this point. You literally have, let me say this again, you have an Islamist communist who is the mayor of New York, and you have an aspiring psychotic child killer as the attorney general for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and a CIA spook as the elected governor. That doesn't sound like learning a lesson of dialing down the rhetoric to me. Nope. And could you even trust these people? Let's say, for instance, you believe Jay Jones, that it was just a weak moment and a text message. Okay, let's say I believe you. Do you really have confidence that he's going to defend the rights of conservatives at the Commonwealth level in Virginia? No. So what does that mean? We have to self-select as much as possible out of their systems, and we have to make ourselves the least amount possible dependent upon them in medicine, in food, and in self-defense. And wrap your head around the reality that you may very reasonably have to defend yourselves from people. And people coming at you with evil intent, but who happen to have the authority of a badge or a mantle of office elected to them by the constituents who want to destroy you and everything our country was built upon. It's an unfortunate reality, but it's one worth wrestling with in your heart about what it is that you are willing to do, what it is that you want to do, and at what point you have your line in the sand. Everyone has to have that. Every man and woman in his or her own heart has to have that place where they say, this far and no farther. If you do X, I will do Y. And part of our ability to hold positions based on conviction and faith is A, having yourself worked out with God. Have your faith worked out between you and the Lord, what it is that you feel justifiable to do according to your understanding of the Scripture. And then number 2, knowing that you have the ability to take positions of conviction because you aren't dependent upon other people, or your dependence is limited. The challenge is, how do we decrease our dependence upon people who hate us? How do we need people less who hate us and want us dead? Obviously, how could you say such an inflammatory thing, Patriot Nurse? Because your AG literally just said this. The AG of Virginia literally just said that he wanted to watch the children of his opponents die in their mother's arms. Does that sound like a person worth placating with nice words and cocktail hour? Mm-mm. So part of this channel, why we have done what we've done over the years, and why you have joined me all these years, for which I'm so grateful, is because, like you, I do not wish to be dependent upon people. I only wish to be dependent upon the Lord. And like you, many of you who have ancestors who fought for this nation, it grieves my heart to know that lesser men are in the process of destroying it. The question is, do we allow these people to destroy our children's future? That's my question for you, for all of us. If you thought that going to a ballot box was going to ensure your security, you're wrong. The question is, how do we move forward? And through what mechanism do we empower ourselves? And I think you have to be empowered on faith. You have to be empowered on faith. We all do. We all have to seek it out and get based in that level and work from the ground up, from our faith up. And my faith says that I certainly don't allow people like that to actualize upon their threats. The question is, at what point do you consider that they actually mean what they say? And is it too late by that point? Hope the video was helpful for y'all. If it encouraged you, caused you to think, please share it with one person. And maybe it's the person who you have regular conversations with about this. Maybe this is a person who had previously been on the fence about, wow, I don't really think they mean stuff. And then, holy cow, they elected what? He said what? Let's be having these conversations, friends. Because it ain't going to get any better within the next 2 years. You can be darn sure that what you see right now is going to be amped up significantly. So we need to be ready for it. Hope the video was helpful for y'all. May the Lord bless and keep you all. May we have light for this darkness ahead of us. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see you later.